A very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the day one of the third edition of AFAC CMO Week. For this edition, our theme is Product and Marketing Innovation. Over the course of 4 days, we will have in-depth discussions with brand marketing leaders across product groups like CG, consumer electronics, e-pharma, and BFSI. The idea is to analyze how product and marketing innovation has become a survival strategy for CMOs caught in the crosshairs of a challenging reality. To begin with, I would like to thank our associate sponsor, MySmartPrice. On the panel, we have Anuja Mishra, VP and Marketing Head, Personal Care and Hygiene of Godrej Consumer Products. Anupam Katheria, AVP, Marketing and Business Development of Emami. Kavita Angre, Director, Consumer and Market Insights Media of L'Oreal. And Rajat Mathur, Head, Consumer Marketing and Innovations of Dabur. Now introducing you to the moderator of the session, Ashwini Gangal, Executive Editor at AFAX. Once again, thank you everyone for joining. Over to you, Ashwini.
Thank you, Debashish. Hi, welcome panelists formally, and hi audience. Welcome to the third edition of CMO Week. Now, to those of you who've been with us at the previous editions of CMO Week, welcome back. And to those of you joining us for the first time, I hope you find this conference insightful. Now, every time we organize this event, we try and stick to a theme, a trend that the universe of consumer marketing in India is influenced by, and a trend that brand marketing experts like my panelists are, the decisions they take are informed by. This week, the umbrella theme is, like Debashish mentioned, innovation in consumer marketing. And today, specifically, we're going to look at this concept of innovation through the prism of FMCG and the FMCG category. So to help me do this, I have with me a wonderful panel that comprises representatives of very different types of segments and products. I'm joined by Anuja of Godrej, Kavita of L'Oreal, Anupam of Emami, and Rajat of Dabur. Welcome once again. Let's begin. I'd like to start this session by inviting my panelists to take about 2 minutes each to specifically talk about just two things. One is summarize the brands and products within your purview, and also summarize the impact that this unnatural situation of the pandemic and extended lockdowns has had on your segment. So quickly summarize that, leave the juice for later. I'll get to specific questions for each of you, but just give me your brief opening remarks. So we can start with Rajat.
Sure, Ashwini. Hi, and very good afternoon to my co-panelists and all the audience who's seeing and listening to us. So just a quick overview. As I'm sure most of you would be aware, Dabur is largely into, health and personal care products. We are also into foods. And in the context of the discussion today, we've also launched a lot of contextual products and portfolio, which is very relevant for today's day and time, which is very COVID specific. So that said, yes, it's a very diversified portfolio of products, catering to wide variety of needs of a very diverse cross-section of consumers. So while, historically the company has been focusing a lot on rural markets, but going forward, of course, there has been a huge transition where we are now looking future forward, and we're looking at products and portfolios which are very relevant for the younger audience. So I think, Ashwini, I'll stop here just to give a very brief overview of what the kind of products we have. And as you mentioned, I'll keep the juice for later. And as we get on to specifics, I'll be happy to elaborate more.
Okay, great. Kavita, why don't you go next?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, I'm Kavita. I look after Insights, Media and Strategy at L'Oreal India. In terms of your first question, brands, L'Oreal is, of course, a pure player, beauty player, and our brands go from mass market brands such as L'Oreal Paris, Maybelline, Garnier that we have in our consumer products division, to professional brands that you would see in the salon division, which is Kérastase, L'Oréal Professional, Matrix, and even Kiehl's, which is our luxury brand. So we really play across the entire piano of beauty products. In terms of your second question, in terms of impact, I think because of a lot of restrictions on socializing and meeting, definitely beauty and some of the categories specifically in beauty did slow down. But again, within that, there are so many opportunities that we've seen in terms of shifts in consumer behavior right across, giving us opportunities to innovate in product, giving us opportunities to innovate in distribution, giving us opportunities to innovate in reaching consumers. That honestly, like we said, we can get into the discussion of it, but yes, there are many opportunities that we have sensed and are working on because of this massive shift that we saw.
Okay, great. I'll come to you with a lot of questions about all of that. Anuja?
Good evening, everyone. I think a big thank you to the AFAX team for having us all here. And really, it's a pleasure to be sharing this stage, a virtual one, with my fellow panelists. So I represent Godrej Consumer, and we're an organization that pretty much span across home and personal care, across categories. I think literally categories that touch your life from the morning, right till you go back. Go back to bed, across discretionary categories, across personal care, home hygiene, and so on. So I think a large spectrum of categories, a lot of essentials and a lot of, like I said, discretionary categories as well. I think one of the big changes that this pandemic has really, brought about for all of us as a marketing fraternity at GCPL particularly has been the speed of innovation and the speed of really looking to bring what the consumer needs into the market. And equally, I think a part of that has also been the an innovation in the way we've looked at consumer listening, and an innovation in the way we've actually brought the products to the consumers in a very omni-channel sense. So it's been quite, I'd say, a transformation of sorts in the way we've looked at marketing very conventionally. To sum it.
Okay. Anupam?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm representing Emami Limited. Lots of power brands, Navratna, Zandu, Fair and Handsome, BoroPlus, lots of power brands and their household names. Emami doesn't need an introduction because it is there in many pockets, very high penetrated products and categories. If I look at your second question in terms of how the brand has impacted or business has impacted, largely most of the portfolio you can club into 3 buckets. You have categories which have got tailwind, where the demand for the product went up, the category got innovated. You have a set of brands which had headwind, right? Consumers thought that these are not relevant, they're an indulgent category, and there are set of brands which are in between. And this has been a very fascinating year for us in terms of changing our approach with this rapid modification. How do you reach out to consumers when the categories is evolving? Categories which never existed earlier, they got created in a fortnight, right? So how do you pick up nuances of product, nuances of insight from consumers, get a prototype done, test it, and more importantly, in the lockdown, how do you get it produced and reach out to consumers, right? That has been a challenge. The categories which were facing headwind, how do you continue to make brand relevant? Because we all knew that this was a temporary phase. So once when the first wave went down, how do you ensure that we continue to be the first brand of choice when consumer came back to their normal life? And the third bucket, and that was the most interesting aspect, that while consumer preference and expectations were changing for the brand and category, how do you ensure that your brands continue to stay relevant? Right? As consumers' expectation changed, how are you tweaking your product mix? How are you tweaking your communication so that product continues to be relevant and they continue to use it or at least stay connected? So it has been a great period in terms of how do we see opportunities get innovation, not just in terms of product, but in terms of whatever mix we have, how do we be innovative and ensure that we continue to add value to consumers, whatever they are, wherever they are.
Okay, thanks, Anupam. I'll come back to you. I have some questions about Imasol and other products
Sure.
on the portfolio. But thank you for those opening remarks. I'm going to start with one question that I'd like all of you to weigh in on. Okay, because the answer I'm hoping will be very different since all of you represent very different types of products. The question is, which area of marketing is innovation most crucial in? Now, I've made a broad list. So I'm hoping this is exhaustive. So there's the product level or the ingredient level or the product format level. Then there's distribution, product design, technology. There's advertising and the whole communication and messaging gamut. Then of course diversification or line extension or new product launches and packaging. So go one by one and tell me which of these has really kept you busy over the last 6 months. Kavita, we'll go with you.
Sure. I think, Anuja, your list was very long. So first I'd like to start. See, innovation is a means to an end. It's a means to an end to increasing your business. So depending on what the problem is, innovation in a certain area is the solution. So for example, I'm just taking an example.
Yeah.
If packaging is not the problem, just innovating in packaging is going to get you nowhere. I mean, there was a term that used to be used, I think, a decade ago called smokes and mirrors. You feel good, you have innovated your packaging. It doesn't make a difference to the consumer at all. So for me, I think we always have to remember innovation is a means to end. So if you pick up technology, if that helps, if innovation in technology helps communicate the efficacy of your brand better, sure, that's the innovation that is needed on the brand. So also when we look at innovation, it's also what is it that you're trying to improve or fix, right? When you start analyzing your marketing mix, right? Depending on that, the answer could lie in any of the areas. So I don't necessarily think that it is one or the other. It is contextual.
Of course.
If you think that the market has become super competitive and your mix is no longer competitive enough, then you might need an innovation in claim, you might need an innovation in product performance, you could need an innovation in communication. For me, it's what is it that you're trying to solve and you use innovation there to solve it.
Absolutely. So give an example then, which of these has really, give an example, pick the one that's most relevant for L'Oreal.
Okay, so let's look at this. Our professional products division, which is essentially our salon division, right? Obviously, we all know salons were shut during the pandemic. I mean, they opened and they were asked to shut again, etc. So what happened is the consumers could not reach you, but you could reach the consumers. So we innovated in reaching the consumers. So a lot of times you have consumers picking professional shampoos and conditioners from the salon as a location. Now, because they're not going to the salons are not open, they couldn't access those products. We made sure we worked with our partners who were the salons so that they could reach the consumer. We call it social commerce, but it's a form of commerce where the salons were getting in touch with their customers saying, would you like us? Do you need this? And obviously nobody had access to those products. So there was a huge demand for it. So we said, okay, consumers can't come to us, but we can go to them. So innovating in that space was something that really, really helped us and our partners. So I think in terms of making sure that, because, our partners were equally affected. Their business was shut, right? So that is one example of where we used social commerce or created this by which you could reach out to your customers and deliver the products that they needed via your partners, because they are still customers of the partners, right? That's one example. If you want another example is a virtual try-ons. Today, consumers are severely restricted in being able to go and try on how the shade will look on you, how the color will look on you. So using virtual try-ons of Modiface, you can figure out how that, whether the red shade looks better on you, whether you like the pink shade. So again, these are innovations that helped us get over the barrier that we were trying to break. So again, it comes down to what problem you're trying to solve.
Sure.
And you use innovations to solve the problem.
Beauty tech, actually. Like you just swipe and you see how a color looks in your face.
Correct.
Right. Absolutely. Rajat, what about you? Just using this list as quick reference, which area has innovation really been crucial from a Dabur perspective?
Yeah, so Ashwini, I think I would tend to agree with what Kavita also mentioned, that it's not just one particular tenant of innovation which kind of made the difference.
Mhm.
It's a combination of various elements, so to speak. And just to illustrate a few examples, um, for example, in distribution, during the peak of the lockdown last year, we realized that while we have a fantastic portfolio of contextual products, but there were restrictions on the sales team going out and selling. There were shops which are not open. You would require e-passes and the complexities around that. So given all those restrictions, we kind of started thinking out of the box. I mean, it's not really, I'm not referring to any technological innovation, but let's say, how to kind of, just like Kavita mentioned, you could take the salon to the consumer. So pretty much on similar thoughts, what we did was we actually tied up with the Jagran Group, and we realized that, they have a massive, distribution of their newspapers going to each and every household every morning. And that, I'm referring to almost a year back when the peak of the lockdown was there, and people had stopped taking newspapers, newspaper deliveries, and their workforce was sitting idle all day. They were losing their daily income, and their source of income was of course getting depleted. So we kind of collaborated with them, and in some of their strong markets, namely Bihar and UP, for example, we actually ensured that while the person is going to deliver the newspaper, or let's say deliver the bill for the month, he also carries some of our very specific contextual Dabur immunity products. Some of them, of course, existed pre-COVID as well, and some were launched during last year's pandemic. So that was one very specific example to illustrate, how we kind of pivoted and tried to leverage the maximum possible in terms of the given constraints. The other, of course, was we actually ran a very massive direct to consumer van operation, and this is largely in smaller towns and mini metro kind of profile markets, where again, because the consumers were not able to go to the stores or the neighborhood kirana stores to go and shop, we actually carried a small van which carried all the immunity products from Dabur, and door to door, supply was ensured to almost about, I mean, the number is huge. I mean, we operated this in almost 23, 24 cities across the country.
Okay.
For almost 7 months continuously. So those are some of the examples in terms of distribution. Then also in terms of the product, while we did a lot of innovation in terms of launching contextual products. In fact, some of our most successful launches have been in the shortest period of lead time. So pre-COVID, for example, we didn't have any hand sanitizer as a product. We never existed in that category. And I remember Anupam just mentioned that launches happening in fortnight. That actually was true in the case of the hand sanitizer product for Dabur, and almost a record. I mean, from Dabur standards internally, it was a bit of a record. And of course, it's a long list. We launched various Ayush certified products and cleaning products and surface disinfectants, and it's a long list. To add to that, we subsequently also took enhance the product efficacy so as to get specific claims on killing the COVID virus also. That further strengthened the product proposition. So continuous innovation, continuous improvement, I think that's the mantra we've been working on for the last 4-5 quarters now.
Right. So mostly distribution and new product launches is what I hear. I will come back to you on the new launches. There are just so many that I have a question about that. Anupam, what about you? When we spoke earlier, you said there's packaging, line extension, communication, and technology. These are sort of the 4 pillars for you. So do talk about that and highlight the areas that have really kept you busy from an innovation perspective.
See, the innovation is the end, right? You have multiple tools to innovate. It will all depend on where you are. In categories which were evolving very rapidly, specifically health and hygiene, we had to bring in new products. And it is not just a Me Too product. How do we create a differentiation? Because consumers, while they are seeking whichever sanitizer is available, or a toilet cleaner is available, or let's say a floor cleaner is available, how do we ensure that they get value from whatever product they are picking up? So in terms of category which were growing rapidly, health and hygiene, we launched Imasol, a range of product which specifically talked about providing your home and personal spaces hygienic. We launched sanitizer, again, very rapid development. We also brought in a range of product under immunity. So Zandu Care launched a lot of immunity built product. But these are categories which were very buoyant, right? So the challenge there is, how do you understand the market, crash your normal innovation cycle, and ensure that you get the right product in the market in time? Because the biggest which has come in this, if you are not in time, in a fortnight the category vanished, actually, in many of the cases, right?
Wow.
So that's in terms of categories which are very rapidly developing. The other set of innovation came in the set of products which are mass, right? How do you ensure that our products are still relevant, right? So for example, in case of Navratna, it is a problem solving brand. We realize that while we are talking about hygiene, there's a tremendous amount of stress build up in the country, right? So how do you engage with consumer? How do you de-stress? Tell them that there are simple ways of de-stressing yourself. And the innovation has been in terms of reaching out to consumers digitally and engaging with them. We rolled out a digital campaign where we got something like 43,000 user-generated content. We got something like 12 billion views in terms of the consumer engaging with the product. So there were spaces where you could relate the current product and make it still relevant for them. So product packaging, in terms of packaging, while everybody has talked about, let's say, sanitizer with a pump, do you really need a pump? You can use with a desktop cap. We were the ones who introduced sanitizer in a sachet format, right? So consumers are looking for solutions. Are you the one who has spotted that solution, and the entire ecosystem works together coherently to give up the solution to consumer first time, right? I think that has been the biggest challenge, and that has taken most of our time.
Interesting. So format. So how many? I mean, what was the quantity? The sachet just.
It's about 2.7 ml.
I see. It's hardly anything, like one single use, right?
I don't know whether you have traveled. I traveled around February by air, and in airline they actually gave out sachets.
I see.
Right, so you could just keep yourself hand clean and surfaces clean.
Yeah.
So you can have sprays. We launched Imasol. Under Imasol, we launched a spray. Right, so you can, it's a surface cleaner. We also launched a pocket spray. So it's a sanitizer where you can it's with a dispensing mechanism, and you can just carry it on in a pocket. So there are packaging solutions which can add value to consumers and create differentiation in the market.
Sure. Right. Audience, I'd just like to remind you at this point, please keep your questions coming and we'll get to them in due course of the discussion. But I'd like to go to Anuja next. You know, Anuja, it's so nice to have you back, because we spoke 6 months ago. We sat down at a conference like this and we spoke in December, and it really seems as though the world has only been spinning faster and faster since I last spoke to you. You know, so I want to understand what has changed, and look at it from the lens of today's topic also. And there's a special question for you, because last time I remember, Anuja, we spoke about the longevity of new product launches. We spoke about the life cycle of newly launched categories, you know, categories that were created in record time. And we also spoke about the decisions a marketer has to make in the sense when to let go and when to pursue a newly launched range. So, you know, is there pressure to keep innovating or to keep a newly launched product going or a line alive for longer than maybe it's meant to be?
Thanks for that question, Ashwini. I'll try and sort of break it down. I think,
Mm.
firstly, taking a perspective of now the last 15 odd months, ever since, the pandemic first struck us,
Hmm.
I think there have been rolling periods, like all the panelists spoke about. I think the first reaction of most organizations, was about launching the right set of products where they felt that their current portfolio may not have been complete, right? So I think we've seen, like you spoke about it, a record number of launches and innovations, and this
Yeah.
mostly happened in the first quarter of in the April, May, June period of last year, right? There was really a lot of action.
Yeah.
I think it's important to just reflect on what happened, after that.
Yeah.
I think everyone did a great job of launching products, and and there was a lot of sort of hoo-ha around it. But I think the challenge really started from there, because, like you rightly said, firstly, I think it's important to just kind of step back and say that innovation was important. I feel like at every at every aspect that you spoke of, because every aspect was disrupted. This pandemic didn't leave any aspect of either the consumer experience or the, typically the way organizations operate. It didn't leave anything untouched. So in that sense, I think we were all constantly looking at every touch point and saying, can I do a better job? Can we serve this need better? Having said that, you're right. I think the world's been spinning faster. Probably a lot of organizations were on the verge of almost writing off a few of these innovations, a quarter back, right? And saying that, there was a survival instinct of consumers where a lot of these hygiene products were needed. But as we're getting into a sustenance mode, maybe some of them would go out of fashion. And guess what?
Right.
The second wave happened. Right. And a lot of these categories, we had launched some 12 categories last year, and some of them, we thought may not really stand the test of time. But now that, the pandemic, the second wave and a much more gruesome wave has come in, the need for some of those categories has evolved. But I think one of the things that I do kind of want to touch upon, Ashwini, what I think all of us have learned as marketers is that there is definitely a better and a faster and a cheaper way to innovate, right, when it comes to products. And we've all done that. I think every organization has beaten its own record in terms of agility on innovation. But I think what's been really important has been staying true to the brand, and I think some organizations have done a slightly better job of that versus the other. But I think one of the lessons has also been that, when the consumers are in as much, depth of anxiety and stress, as any of us, how is my brand really making a difference beyond its utility and beyond, just the consumer experience? How are you actually digging into what the consumer is feeling, and, how are you really sort of appealing to them even at an emotional level? And I think from the second or third quarter, we started shifting gears on that, Ashwini. We said the product, its efficacy, its claims are extremely critical, and, we've got that right. But now what's important is, why would this consumer prefer to bond with me as a brand for a longer period of time, right? And that's really where the choice of media, the choice of content, right, the choice of storytelling, all of that came into play. And kind of tying back the offline to the online. I think the world will never be more omni-channel than it is now, right? So how are you therefore really ensuring that, when I'm talking, through one hand to the consumer, on one particular media, my consumer experience is very sort of, relevant. I'm just kind of taking an example of a brand like Synthol for us. Right now, it's a brand that's a freshness brand. Of course, it's a hygiene brand. But within that, it's a brand that stands all about exploration and living your life to the fullest. And we said, and it's really kind of anchored on exploration and travel. Now, here is a world where travel only exists in your dreams and wishes and aspirations. And we said, but the world is feeling this way, right? So how about creating a community, right, where everyone comes in and talks together about their experiences of travel? We get a lot of travel influencers and, kind of fuel the desire for travel and look at, building a world of travel when it opens up together. So a lot of very rich, engaging content that came out of, of those spaces. So I think it just helped us to kind of reimagine the brand, Ashwini, which is beyond just NPDs and innovations, which could sometimes be short-term to medium-term oriented.
Okay. No, that is interesting. I will come back. Rajat, I'd like to come to you next because, like I mentioned earlier, I'm taken by the sheer prolificity of new product launches at Dabur, and we've been feverishly documenting all of them. The latest one being today. There's a new germ kill shampoo from the stable of Dabur, So, I mean, whether it's apple cider or cow ghee or, Anu Tailam nasal drops, it's just dizzying the pace at which Dabur is rolling out new products, some 40, 50 products in, if I'm right, in a year, if not more. So, I'd like to ask you 2-3 questions around this fact. One of them, of course, I know it's different for different products and depending on the TG, all of that is true. But surely by now there must be a broad template or blueprint in place, idea to shelf sort of template. So walk us through what really goes into these new product launches. And secondly, what are the typical challenges you encounter along the way? And, also if there's time, talk about the appetite at the consumer's end for so many new products. How do you make these decisions?
Sure. So, first of all, Ashwini, all of the new products need not necessarily be COVID contextual. Yeah, especially in the last year, yes, a majority of them have been.
Right.
But having said that, there have been certain other products or new categories where we've entered into, which are not necessarily COVID specific. That said, yes, you're right. The sheer pace and the quantum of new launches has been something which the Dabur system hasn't seen in many, many years.
Yeah.
In fact, we've actually crunched the entire launch cycle from, let's say, which earlier used to be several months, to a few weeks in some cases, right? So the whole cycle for NPD, going through the funnel of ideation to shortlisting to, checking out feasibility and then working on the product, concepts and everything, all of that has plunged. So that said, I think what has also happened is, in terms of our processes and systems, I think there's been a fundamental shift from, let's say, very step-by-step sequential way of working earlier. We are now working, especially in the context of innovation and NPDs, we are working on parallel work streams, right? So, while, there would be a team which is working on, let's say, product development, we would simultaneously initiate consumer check. We would parallelly, start working on the packaging development. So it's not that, you pass gates and then you kind of shift gears and move on to the next stage. I think we have consciously, in order to fast track new product launches, we've actually started working in parallel work streams. That's been one big change. And that has been one of the reasons for the large number of launches which you see and you keep reporting on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that is one piece. The other, of course, is, you mentioned about the consumer's appetite to lap up, so many new products. I think the challenge, even for consumers, because of course, each product and category has its very focused TG. But I think the bigger challenge for us as a company is to ensure that, the sales and distribution channel, our channel partners, our distributors, our stockists, they are able to, give the due, let's say, focus and attention to each of these new launches. Because if they are, left unattended, of course, they will never reach the desired level of sales. So I think internally for us, that's been a bigger challenge rather than, at the consumer end. Because, I mean, yes, in certain cases, yes, we've also launched some e-com first products which are new categories for us. So, for example, we've launched apple cider vinegar, which was not part of our portfolio earlier. But we saw some great traction in that category, especially in the e-commerce space. And currently, as we speak, it's exclusively available only on e-commerce platforms. And after a certain threshold level, of course, we will scale it up to other channels as well.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I just worry that are we valorizing speed to a fault, because it's just so fast. And is there some optimum threshold in mind, or how does this work? You just keep churning.
Speed without compromise on any let's say aspect related to quality security or any aspect related to, hygiene checks, etc., etc. It's only getting work done faster and in a more efficient way. I think its focus is more on improving efficiency and faster approvals, faster decision making, etc. Without any compromise, of course.
Sure. Kavita, I'll come to you next. You did mention shifts in distribution and stuff. So I want to ask you, you head insights for L'Oreal across divisions. I want to ask you to highlight one or two or maybe three key consumer insights that have really moved the needle for your brands over the last 6 months. And of course, we've been in crisis mode way longer than 6 months, but with every peak and crest, there's a new set of insights at play, I would imagine. So that's why maybe if you agree, there's merit in sticking to the recent past.
Sure. I think one of the first ones we realized was a low touch economy, right? Nobody was going out anybody, nobody wanted to touch products, samplers, trials, and which is where I think the whole virtual try on was a real big benefit because you could experience without the fear of touching. I think the second one I would talk about is in across most of the beauty categories, I think the consumer awareness seems to have grown higher in terms of, the efficacy of science and the impact of science. Today, suddenly you see a lot more people talking about ingredients, about actives that work on a certain say skin problem. I mean, this is of course a combination of multiple things, the whole e-commerce boom happening, and and again in the pandemic, I think the whole boost to science that happened in general in the world. I think so suddenly we find far higher awareness for science-based ingredients and propositions, where consumers are talking almost in a language that which reflects very, very highly aware. They say retinol and hyaluronic acid and niacinamide, and you did hear this thing before. So I think that is another big trend that we're seeing, where there is high demand for efficacious products driven by science, and of course there is both. It's driven by nature as well. You see that as well, because of course as a country we have a long history of some of the nature-based efficacy legacy, but there is also science, and I think this one is something that we're seeing rise on a huge scale. I think the third one I would talk about is sustainability. And again, I was just going to some of the questions the audience has put. Sustainability, I think as a human race, we realized we've just taken Mother Earth for granted for far too long. And if this generation doesn't stop doing it, I don't think we stand a second chance. There is no planet B, right? That's how they say it. There's no planet B. So I think I think the difference now has also been because of the high awareness of sustainability. I think in India as well, there is some willingness to act and pay for sustainability. It's interesting if you go back to our culture where we recycled polythene milk packets and newspapers. I think we had this a bit as a part of our own lives, but I think now we are getting that to the forefront in terms of the choices we make, and we are willing to pay more for sustainable brands. We demand sustainability in brand conversations, and maybe linked to sustainability also, we demand we demand the what is the brand purpose? What is the difference you're making? Somewhere to Anuja's point as well. Of course, you solve a very practical issue in terms of maybe making me look good or cleaning the surface. But what is the do good you do to the world? I think some of these trends are here to stay, and they are definitely impacting consumer choices as we speak.
Okay. No, it's interesting you mentioned the whole science-led marketing, because that was pretty much my next question. I'd like Anupam, Rajat and Anuja to come in here as well. The question is, to what extent are you forced to, or compelled to rather, weave in popular public discourse into your marketing strategy? I'm not saying it's at odds with it, but it may not have been on the table to begin with. So whether it's plant-based or whether it's purity-led, or whether it's science-led, or whether it's talking about going vegan. So to what extent are you then forced to keep your finger on that pulse as well while crafting your marketing strategy? And is it necessarily a good thing that you have this incoming stream?
Yeah, for L'Oreal, because we are a science-based company, it was started by a chemist 108 years ago. I don't think we had to do anything differently, right? So it's part of our DNA, and that is something that is now, there's more traction for it, in a manner of speaking. Because I think the danger of doing something which is not authentic, you will pay a very huge price. And consumers can smell inauthenticity from a distance, It is.
Right.
Absolutely. So it's not possible for, I think the advice to all brands is stay in your DNA, be authentic about it, because otherwise it's very easy for consumers to make out. Very easy.
So Anupam, come in here.
So for us, see, health and hygiene is something which has become very popular. But I think what is going to happen is consumers' expectation on health and hygiene products are going to go up. What has also happened in this pandemic is consumers have gone back to roots. Their trust on natural products, Ayurveda has gone up. So you heard about the haldi, the benefits of turmeric, kala, all of that has gone back to consumers' life. And whenever we've done our consumer immersion, consumers' belief on all these products have gone up. Emami as a company, we have very strong roots in these kind of products, and we have many products which are based on Ayurveda. So I completely agree with what Kavita is saying. The brand has to stick to its strength. What does it stand for? And for many of our brands which are based on Ayurveda, they would stick to that and would reach out to consumer at the same time.
Sure. Rajat, come in here, because as the head of innovation and consumer marketing, to what extent do you have to weave in this popular discourse of whether it's plant-based or something science-led or purity-led narrative into your marketing strategy when it comes to hatching new product launches?
Right. So, Ashwini, honestly, we actually, constantly struggling between, two ends of the spectrum. At one end, we have products like Chyawanprash and, a whole host of ethical Ayurvedic products, which are targeted to a very specific set of consumers. At the other end, we are also very, very active, and, it's a very robust channel, which is the e-com channel for us. And that's catering to a very different profile of consumers, much younger in terms of their demographics, much more modern, aware of the, what's happening around them and around the world. So, to cater to that end of the spectrum, there are products like apple cider vinegar. There is Vatika Select range of shampoos, which are completely, no nasties. So there are no silicones, no sulfates, no parabens. So that's the proposition there. So we have a wide spectrum to cater to, and therefore, for us to keep that fine balance of all coming under the Dabur architecture is a huge challenge, and therefore, at the moment, the way we are segregating is that some of these slightly more evolved, futuristic categories are right now restricted to e-commerce. But as I said earlier, as we scale up, as the consumer traction keeps building, we will of course introduce them to the mass channels as well. So that's been our approach right now, and we're trying to kind of balance both ends simultaneously.
That's very interesting. Anuja, come in here. Have the rules of the game changed when it comes to deciding, what next, which format? Because I think on your portfolio also there was something to do with powder to liquid. Was that led by something that's in sync with the popular narrative out there, and how was that decision taken?
So Ashwini, I'd firstly say that at a very fundamental level, the rules of the game may not have changed. I think the speed of the game has changed, right? I think to some extent. Listening to consumers, trend spotting, and then, looking at how it fits into your larger brand architecture has probably always been, the way we would have approached any kind of launches. I think now you may be just also looking at maybe stretching the architecture a little and saying that, can my brand accommodate a little more? Can I sort of slice and dice my brand, to various cohorts while holding on to some of its core values? I think coming specifically to the powder to liquid format, we launched Mr. Magic, which is, now Protect is the second largest hand wash brand. And we launched this is now almost 3 years back. The entire, objective behind it was a very fundamental consumer need again, right? Hand washing was largely done through the soap, right? And the bigger reason for consumers to not be able to shift to a liquid hand wash format was primarily affordability and wastage. And when, we looked at sort of, triangulating all those 3 points, we said, essentially the challenge for us is, providing affordability, providing a great product, and sustainability, because eventually there's a lot of plastic footprint, etc., that also comes with some of these formats. And that was really the genesis of the powder to liquid format, because it gives you a hand wash which may be equal to, let's say, 3 soaps. It's a no touch, kind of a format. It's priced extremely competitive. It's the world's most affordable kind of a hand wash, and it's very sustainable, right? Because you're fundamentally not shipping water. And you're reducing the carbon footprint, and the plastic footprint overall. So I think that really was, in my mind, I think, a very true sense of innovation, because you're looking, you're not reacting. It was not a reactive innovation per se, right? But it was really an innovation that was very proactive. It was built from the lens of solving a much larger problem in a very disruptive manner. And I really feel that over a period of time, you will see a mix of innovations that will be breakthrough, that will be extremely disruptive, some which will be more tactical and, here and now. But I think fundamentally it will all be about, like Kavita said, staying authentic to your brand. I think, when we now sort of look back over the last 12 to 15 months and say, what are the brands that consumers are still latching on to, we'll see a very common sliver that these are all brands that didn't really lose track of their core identity, and they continue to do what they're known to do a lot more by the consumers. Now you can go the science route or the ingredient route, but as long as your brand can uphold that story, I think it's authentic, and the consumers will see through it.
Okay, great, fantastic. That's a wonderful note to end this on, because we're out of time. Sorry, audience, I see a lot of questions have come in, but we ran out of time. Come back tomorrow. We'll have a new set of brand marketing experts and a new topic tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And I think we've covered a lot of ground. We've covered many different aspects of innovation in consumer marketing. So thank you, Rajat, Kavita, Anuja, and Anupam. Thank you very much for your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.